recently I've been thinking about this concept of the science. Right? We keep hearing this term,
Oh,
we're following the science. And I really object to that term, the science, right? I think it
yeah.
should just be called science. It doesn't need the in front of it, because actually it reflects a real misconception about what
Mm,
science is. It sort of
mm,
implies that science is all, that there's just one view
mm,
on something, and that all this, that the science is all kind of it's all based on consensus, and all scientists
mm,
agree. And that certainly isn't true. I mean, it's true if you're talking about gravity, like if you drop an apple, it's going to fall to the ground or whatever.
mm,
But I mean, something, with these new emerging sort of viruses, there's not a consensus of opinion amongst scientists at all. I mean, there's a huge variety of opinion amongst scientists as to,
mm,
the best way to go about controlling a virus like coronavirus and pandemics in general, and or how, yeah, I mean, there's huge variability
mm,
um, in scientific opinion and huge disagreements. And actually, that's kind of how science works, because science works
mm,
by someone comes up with a view or a theory, and
mm,
then other scientists try to sort of knock that down, or
mm,
disprove it, and then eventually maybe there's enough evidence to prove that previous theory had got flaws. So
mm,
then you create a new theory that's like
mm.
better than that, and then you kind of have that new theory in place, and other people try to disprove it. I mean, that's kind of how
Mm.
science works. Actually, it doesn't work based
Yeah.
on the science, everybody agreeing.
And you have to understand how scientific studies are structured, devised, and how they work. So
Yeah,
a lot of people out there who never have been involved in anything to do with their theories, they assume that if a study concluded something, then that's it. It is set in
oh yeah,
stone.
that's right.
It never is. It
No,
never is. It's just every study is flawed, and
yeah,
scientific studies basically you select certain number of variables and you try to assess whether based on those variables A equals B.
yeah,
But you have to understand that number of variables is infinite,
yeah. Well,
really.
yeah, that's right. There's
And
so
yet
many.
you can't include infinite number of variables in every study.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean, especially, well, in the social science. I mean, yeah, in social sciences. I mean, actually, psychology has been, famously in the last few years has had this thing they're calling the kind of replication, the crisis of replication, whereby a lot of the early, really quite, famous experiments in early psychology, they can't replicate them now. Like,
Mm,
off the top of my head, I think there was a sort of the the study where they had like prisoners and guards. That's it, the prisoner and guard study, where they had a
mm,
bunch of university students, and some of them
mm,
were playing the role of the guards, and some were playing the role of the prisoners.
mm,
And for a couple of weeks, they had them in this artificial environment, and eventually, all this kind of bullying behavior started and whatnot. But apparently, they can't replicate that now. And a
mm,
whole load of, apparently, the marshmallow study as well, which they put
mm.
marshmallow in front of a kid. Do you know about the marshmallow study?
Yeah.
They
Mm,
put a marshmallow in front of the kid, and then if the kid is able, you say
mm,
to the kid, well, if you don't eat that marshmallow,
mm.
you just can
Yeah.
wait 10 minutes, you'll get two marshmallows. And
Yeah.
and then they looked at those, the ones who kind of had enough self-control to not
Mm,
eat the marshmallow.
mm,
Apparently they looked at them later in life, and they
mm,
were doing like much better than the ones who didn't have. But apparently there's been they haven't been able to replicate that study. So, which is kind of disappointing, because that's kind of one of my favorite studies in psychology, actually. But it's just especially the social sciences. I mean, psychology is a kind of borderline between
mm,
social science and natural science. But I mean, they've been sort of no, there's so many variables involved that you do get this
mm,
replication issue. But it's not just social science. It is actually, you know, certainly in areas like biology, biological sciences, medicine. I mean,
mm,
medicine is actually a kind of a, it's got all sorts of social science aspects to it. Medicine, actually,
mm.
when you're looking at, yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah,
That's kind of science that I've been
yeah,
involved
yeah,
with, and looked at those studies, and the amount of variables is even
yeah.
bigger,
Well,
because
yeah.
you have to not only
Mm,
consider all the objective biological metrics or
mm,
variables. You also have to consider psychological
yeah,
metrics
yeah.
and variables.
Mm. Well,
Um,
and environmental as well. Because if you're looking at human populations and you're saying, well, why is it there's greater incidence of, you know, COVID amongst this demographic
mm,
compared to that demographic? It's not, you know, you're looking at, yeah, you're looking at the environment they're living in, the type of jobs they do,
mm,
you know, what kind of home environments they live in,
mm,
so many different factors, you know, it's just off the scale, right? All the factors you have to
mm,
control for. So, but I mean,
mm,
with the sort of papers on, there's been a whole load of papers on whether lockdowns are effective in
mm,
controlling the number of people who die of COVID. And for every paper that sort of says there's no evidence they're effective, there's a paper that says they are effective. I mean,
mm,
and pretty much with COVID, pretty much every paper you can find that says one thing, you can find another paper that says the opposite, right? So
mm,
actually, in these kind of areas of science, it's not until I think, you know, that
mm,
in, yeah, they call it meta-analysis. So once you've got like hundreds
mm,
of papers on a
mm.
topic, you kind of gather those papers together, and then you can start to get a picture from that. You can't
Yeah, but
actually make,
even those are
yeah,
often inconclusive. If you
I
look at
can, yeah,
meta-analysis,
yeah,
they
well,
very often are
yeah, yeah,
inconclusive.
yeah. But anyway, I don't know. But anyway, this notion of the science, and actually, that, you know, we keep hearing this term anyway, the science, and to me, that's a very convenient way of. It's almost like a way of kind of, you know, it gives an excuse for tyranny, in fact, because
Mm,
if you kind of, for government ministers, all they have to kind of say is, well, terribly sorry that, you know, we're putting you all under home arrest for the next year.
mm,
We
mm.
obviously we don't want to
The
do
rest
that.
of your life,
Yeah, we really don't, you know, but we had no choice because
because
sorry
of the
about this.
science.
Yeah, really sorry about this, but we had to follow the science. We have no choice here, you know. So, and that's another reason why they keep wheeling out that, you know, what's it, half witty and off balance. Those two, yeah, like, yeah. I mean, I just honestly, I despair at those two people, really.
Mm,
Like, you know, the reason why, you know, they wheel those guys out, right, is because they're the sort of they're the public face of the science, right? So
mm,
Boris Johnson can kind of stand
mm,
there and sort of say, oh yeah, well, I'm a really freedom loving guy, you know, I
mm.
know you voted for me because
Yeah,
I'm a
it's
bit of a
them.
miss.
It's them.
It's not really, yeah, not me, Gov. Like, sorry about this. Like, just, you know, just following the science, right? Had no choice. So yeah, so really, it just gets the government off the hook. They can kind of
Mm,
stand behind these scientists and
mm,
just and then not really bother mentioning the fact that they're actually just following a very, very narrow
mm.
sort of view, a very, very narrow set of.
One-sided view.
Yeah, yeah. They're not taking advice from the full range of scientists. They're just
Mm,
literally they're just sampling a narrow,
mm,
yeah, all these people they put on stage, really. You know,
mm,
it's a very narrow kind of perspective from the scientific
mm,
world. They just
mm,
don't, yeah, and they're not telling and the British public that, yeah, well, actually, yeah, we know there's all these other scientists who think the opposite, but we're ignoring those. They're not bothering to tell us about that, and the media aren't telling us about that
mm.
either. So yeah, I mean, I really just yeah, I mean, to me, it's a huge mistake, this kind of following advice just from one very narrow range of scientists.
But like we started this discussion with talking about how we as a society have gone so far down this road that
Yeah,
now they're literally looking for anything that would confirm that narrative.
Yeah.
because they just can't afford to
Yeah.
they can't afford to have this wide and reasonable discussion
Yeah. No.
anymore, because there is literally no basis for this no longer, and this would
Yeah.
have to come out,
Well, I
and
definitely. Yeah.
big
Well, I definitely.
questions would have to be answered.
Yeah. Well, they definitely can't afford to have. Yeah, like you say, they can't afford that discussion now because if they start,
Mm,
you know, talking to these other scientists, if the media starts kind of talking about people like Carl Hennigan and they give them a voice,
mm,
and that whole argument, hundreds of probably thousands of infectious disease scientists out there who think that a general lockdown was a big mistake,
mm.
then yeah, it's going to be very embarrassing for the government because
Well, let's not forget that there are a lot of scientists and researchers that are speaking out, but there are even more of them that are not speaking out
no,
because they're
yeah,
afraid,
well,
or
yeah, no,
because they've been silenced.
well, yeah, they don't want to get cancelled, do they?
Yes.
Yeah.